My name is Jim Rogers. I work for the NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service. That's an agency under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I'm a wildlife biologist for them. And today I wanted to talk to y'all about a little bit about just some opportunities, mainly federal financial assistance maybe that might be available to some private landowners. All these programs are underneath the 2014 Farm Bill. And the way it starts out is the local soil and water conservation districts will have a meeting. The idea is that people will come in, the public can come in, anyone can participate. It can be any kind of a stakeholder, private landowner, just anybody with any interest at all, and come in and put their 2 cents in on these meetings. And the idea is that the Soil and Water Conservation District then relays that information to NRCS. In all reality, NRCS is there at the meeting and almost conducting the meeting, but it's under the wing of the Soil and Water Conservation Districts in each county.
Did you already say where these meetings are?
They'll be, every county in Texas, for example, will be represented by NRCS office. Most counties have an NRCS office in them. And they'll be held, they may hold them in a public building, some sort of community building or something, or actually in the office. Kind of depends how the office is set up, if they have a meeting room there or not. And I have something here in a little bit, like a little website where you can go and kind of locate an office locator. So some of the categories when I talk about these Farm Bill programs, they have, when you sign up, you can self-certify whether you're a beginning farmer, rancher, socially disadvantaged farmer, rancher, and some historically underserved groups. And also a veteran farmer rancher is another category. And this is a self-certification kind of thing. They'll have some stuff outlined. You can check if you fit any one of those groups, and sometimes there's an increased share rate on the payments that you might get for some sort of conservation practice for some of these groups if you fit. I'm just going to talk about 4 of the programs that we deal with mostly, the most common ones. There's several other ones, but these are the ones that I find that come up most often and fit most folks that come into the office. The EQIP program, which is Environmental Quality Incentives Program, they almost referred to that as, I've heard somebody refer to it as our flagship program. That's where most of our technical and financial assistance goes out through the NRCS offices. A lot of people that come in are farmers and ranchers. It could be, but it's not necessarily just that. It can be any kind of a small landowner with just a few acres behind the house. It usually needs to be something big enough that that you're doing some sort of conservation practice on. It's something bigger than putting up a birdhouse or something like that. It's something where you get a tractor involved, putting up fence, something like that. I'm not going to go through all these EQIP deadlines or guidelines, but there's no minimum size to an operation. I mean, it can be any size. We don't have any requirements say you have to be this big to come in here and work with us. There is some financial, if there's some people that don't meet the eligibility because they might make too much money to apply, to actually be eligible for some of these programs, and you can only get so much during the span of a Farm Bill life or whatever, which is like $450,000 over the course of, I think, like 6 years or something like that. Another program, and I should talk more about on the EQIP deal. It's where you go into the office, you work with the NRCS personnel, you come up with a conservation plan of, you determine your goals and objectives and how you're going to get there. So you come up with different practices, like are we going to do some tree planting, or are we going to do some wetland restoration, some fencing. And I'll go into more of that here in a minute. And you're getting the kind of a payment share rate on that practice, about per acre, per foot, per tree, that kind of deal. And that's versus this conservation stewardship program which we have, which the idea for this program is you go in, they inventory what you're doing on that property, and the idea is that you're getting rewarded for that conservation that you're doing on the property. So you get a payment rate based on what you're doing already, and then they try to, in the plan, you're going to add some enhancements to that operation. You'll figure out there'll be a whole list of things that you can look at and say, you know what, that'll work for me, that'll work for me, that won't work for me, and you put that into a 5-year plan. And whenever you do that, the idea is you got your conservation on the ground, you're going to enhance that a little bit, and you get some additional payments on top of what you're getting rewarded for initially on your original operation that you go in with. And a lot of times we can work towards this with the EQIP program. You can use that to benefit what you get into the CSP program later on down the road, because you get rewarded for that conservation you've been doing over the years with NRCS. Or you could be a brand new person also that's never been in the NRCS office before. There's also we have some conservation easement programs. We say ASEP, we have lots of acronyms for just about everything. I can't remember exactly what they all stand for half the time, because we talk a lot in these acronyms. And under ASEP program, there's one called ALE. It's agricultural land easement. And for this, you work through some sort of a conservation group, NGO type, maybe Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited. You have an agreement with them on a conservation plan, and they're the ones that actually apply for that easement. They apply for your land, you go through them. But you have to be sponsored basically by that organization to get one of these conservation easements. And they're always, a lot of this stuff is brand new with this new farm bill. I hadn't dealt with this a lot yet, but these are going to be, the option's going to be permanent easements on this versus this wetlands reserve easement, which you have three options. You may have a permanent conservation easement, 30-year, or a 10-year restoration agreement. This is something that a landowner can apply for them by themselves. They don't have to have a sponsored group putting in the application for them. And this is basically the old WRP program, the Wetlands Reserve Program, if anybody's heard of that before. They just changed it to WRE now. So a lot of this is, and just because it says Wetlands Reserve, don't get the wrong idea that a lot of people think that that's just, I have a wetland on my place and I'm going to conserve it and protect it. But that's not really what it is. It's actually for wetland restoration. So the eligible land for this program is land that's been manipulated in the past. That used to be wetland. It was turned into pasture. It was turned into cropland. Somehow the hydrology's been altered on it. And the idea with this program is to take that and restore it to what it would have been historically before the manipulation. A lot of that stuff I just described, I just want to go through some scenarios real quick. As far as the kind of projects we're talking about. I was wondering how blurry this picture was going to be, and I'm warning you here in a second, a couple of my slides got cut off somehow, so don't laugh at me, including this picture. But anyway, it's not too bad on this one. This is just an overview. If you're talking about restoring hydrology, creating shallow water habitats, what we refer to that right there is, we call that macro topography. It's kind of a fancy name for creating shallow water. I think micro is like less than 6 inches. Macro is maybe from 6 to 30, something along those lines, 6 to 30 inches. This is a lot what we can do all this stuff that I'm about to talk about through these conservation easements, or actually through EQIP or that CSP program. A lot of this stuff, all the same practices can be done. It's just the way you approach it. And we're not just talking about creating shallow water habitat through digging the small macro topography stuff. We're also talking about maybe some levees and water control structures. It depends on the site, kind of to see what's needed on that site. Once engineers start looking at it, we kind of get on the ground and look at it. But a lot of levees and water control structures are not not natural. A lot of times we're not using the WRE program to restore it that way, because it's only in certain situations you could say that that's restoring it to what it was historically. But we can also be talking about tree and shrub planting on these wetlands as well. That's something we might use in restoration of wetlands. Here's one of my famous slides that got cut off here, but we're also in restoring grassland. We might be talking about planting native grasses back. We might also be talking about brush management as well, because I see a lot of fields along the coast that, if you just got that brush cover down, a little bit of brush in it is actually pretty good for the most part when you're talking about some nesting species in the grass, but you may want to do some brush management to get that percentage down to maybe 5 or 10% versus maybe 90% cover the way it is now, and let that grass come back naturally. And it's not always planting or mechanical, chemical brush management. Sometimes it's restoring grassland through prescribed grazing. A lot of people don't think about it that way, and to do prescribed grazing, a lot of times you got to put in cross fences to set up, be able to rotate the cattle and such, and put in water developments. Whenever you cross fence, you almost always have to put some water developments in there, or you could use the water developments within the infrastructure that you already have to increase your prescribed or your rotation of the grazing on that. property. And then even prescribed burning, that would help with brush management without getting into mechanical and chemical brush management. And it may simply also be, we have some incentive payments too that we're getting into a little bit more now. And we call them wetland and upland wildlife habitat management is the practice that that's the actual word for the practice that we use. And what we do there is we develop a system, basically a plan of all kinds of different things. It's not an individual practice, it's a system that we write up in a narrative, and you're kind of agreeing that I'll do this, this, and this, and this, and you'll get an incentive payment for that much per acre to kind of help you out to install that. To me, this gives you a lot more freedom because you're saying, okay, I don't have to build this fence the exact way. I don't have to move my cattle exactly the same way. You're not held to as many rules in this to get paid. You're kind of just following that plan, and you can adjust that plan as you go. And here's that website I talked about. It's if you Google like USDA Service Center Locator, and it does, okay, I did cut off my link up there. I don't, it's pretty easy to find. You just type that in and find it, and it'll give you a little state map there. You click on the county, and it'll tell you what office that you need to contact there for that county that you're looking at. And it may or may not be in that county, but most of the time it is. We have, in East Texas up in the northern end, we have so many small counties that sometimes there's one office that operates two.
Exactly what I'm talking about. Will they know about all these programs?
They'll know about all of them. And if they don't, if it's something that they're not used to working in, like all of them work in the EQIP program, and every county gets a certain amount of money to distribute through the EQIP operation, through that EQIP program. If they don't, if it's one of those programs that they might not know as much about, they have zone and state office that they can contact those people and learn a little bit more from them, or bring them in to actually meet with you and set up an appointment and stuff like that. And that's usually where I come into play, because I'm at the zone level and work in 50 different counties, and so I hop around between these offices. I also was going to just mention briefly, I don't want to get too much into Texas Parks and Wildlife stuff, because I noticed there's one Texas Parks and Wildlife guy here. I was talking to him earlier, and so I don't want to say too much. Better I just stay away from that too much. But anyway, but one of our biologists, I put this little quote, and I didn't put his name because it's not an exact quote. I just kind of paraphrased it. But biologists from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Texas Parks and Wildlife have brought a lot of WRPs to us through the work with private landowners, and not just WRP. They brought people to us that have gotten involved in some of our other programs over the years and have worked with NRCS in a partnership to develop enhanced wetlands as well as restore grassland ecosystems. What I'm taking from this, and in my experience as well, is, you know, all these biologists, whether U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife, NRCS, the idea is the same. We all get together, we come up, we determine goals and objectives, we get a plan, and then we try to find a way to get some financial assistance to it if you want, or you can just go with us and just work with us constantly on our technical assistance that we can provide. And there's two main programs that I'm familiar with that offer some financial assistance for landowners through U.S. Fish and Texas Parks and Wildlife. It's the Partners for Fish and Wildlife and the Landowner Incentive Program, otherwise known as LIP. As far as the Partners Program, make sure I have enough time. It's the same thing. You meet with them in the field. I'm not going to go into all this. You meet in the field. You come up with a conservation plan after you determine your goals and objectives. Figure out how you're going to attack it. Stuff that they usually work on as far as Partners for Fish and Wildlife is areas that you're usually looking at some sort of species concern, some sort of threatened endangered species, some sort of critical habitat for some sort of a species of concern is what they're targeting with this money. I included the website in case anybody wanted, or you get some more information for it, but that's, in the past, we've had some people that we work with and we don't have money available for them, and we'll go to U.S. Fish and say, look, here's what we've been looking at. What do you think? Do you think this would be a good candidate for any of your Partners for Fish and Wildlife money? And sometimes it's something that we couldn't get them money for just the way it worked out, but they were able to get some money towards the project. So we all work together on it. I'm not going to go through this. This is off of their actual flyer, that website that I had. If you Google that, Partners for Fish and Wildlife, it shows you kind of the process. Basically, you meet with them, you come up with a plan, they rank it, they send in the application, and you see whether or not you can get some money for that. They work on native grasslands, wetlands, riparian areas, outdoor learning areas, and then and also unique restoration activities like this is a longleaf pine deal that they're talking about right here on that picture, which we do a lot of longleaf pine as well, work with NRCS offices. In case you're looking at this saying, hey, who do I get a hold of for this, whatever, I include some phone numbers here. There's a state map or whatever, and are you going to post any of this anywhere where somebody can get access to any of these?
I'm going to try and get the PowerPoint presentation onto our valuewetlands.tamu.edu website.
Okay.
And all of these programs that you've covered so far, at least, are in our programs if you are looking through the list.
Okay.
Programs are on our website.
Okay.
And it talks a little more about basically what he's saying now, a little details about the program, and links to the actual website.
Okay. I didn't want to put you on the spot. I was just asking because I didn't want to go through it too fast if somebody, in case somebody was writing down a phone number or something. But
We'll get permission from everyone to use them.
okay.
We'll try and put that.
All righty. And then Texas Parks and Wildlife program called Landowner Incentive Program. I've seen several projects done through this program, and essentially this is the same money that the Partners for Fish and Wildlife money also funds this program. So if you go through Texas Parks and Wildlife, you're getting access to that money as well. They just distribute it through a different program. So it's the same money, same goals. It's still going towards critical habitat that's got a species or a suite of species in mind. It might be grassland birds, it might be mottled duck. You've got kind of an idea of some critical habitat for a certain species that you're targeting through this program as well. And anytime I'm looking to point somebody towards working with Texas Parks and Wildlife, I always like this website here. It's Find a Biologist link, and then I included it there. If you just type in Find a Biologist, Texas Parks and Wildlife, it'll pop up this website here. You can go to click on that map there, and it's real easy to see what kind of what the contact info is for the biologist that you're looking for that area. Just to reiterate, the key to all this is, approach your NRCS personnel, approach your U.S. Fish and Wildlife, your Texas Parks and Wildlife, get them all out there together at the same time if you can. Go into the whole thing with the idea that, hey, we're going to develop a plan, figure out our goals. Let's get that lined out first before we worry about what kind of money we can get to this. The plan is the main thing, and we can always find ways to put in applications for some of this financial assistance to get this stuff done. And if the money doesn't come, if everybody's working together, I think it'll go a lot smoother if you go into the idea getting the plan done first. That's one of our biggest deals is we like to start with a conservation plan, and we tend to have people come in saying, hey, I heard you had some free money available, and they're not really even worried about really what they want to accomplish. They go backwards almost, and it works out a lot better if you start working with these folks on a long-term basis, and they get to know your property, and as opportunities arise, they tend to go, hey, I've been working with this person a lot. Here's an opportunity. I need to call them up, and we can get this plan going. So